But you know what? We have a guest here, Gracie Murphree, and she has written a book called Journey to Justice, Finding God and Destiny in Darkness. Now, let me tell you something. This woman has been through it. She's lived in from Alabama, right, Gracie?
Originally from Boston.
Alabama, but
and moved to Alabama.
But has been in Honduras since 2005. And my goodness, the stories that she has and what she has been through, she and her husband, since they have lived in Honduras. And I myself, my husband and I, have both been to Honduras, and I can vouch for what she says is the absolute truth. So many things go on there that no one knows, right, Gracie? Can you just tell us the beginning? Why Journey to Justice?
Well, my husband and I were living in Hartselle, Alabama, and he was a pastor for the Northern Alabama Conference of the Methodist Church for 10 years in Northern Alabama. And we had gone on a mission trip in 2004 to Honduras for 10 days and brought a team. And he was in the boys' dorm, and I was in the girls' dorm, and we were packing up to leave. And, you know, the team, they're always saying, oh, I'm ready to go home, you know, hot water, flush toilets, you know, all that. But there was this feeling that I had of, like, I was leaving home, not going home. And when we got to the airport, my husband got bumped up to first class, and I'm alone with the group. Yeah, I know, that's just not fair. But I'm sitting there at the window, and we take off from Toncontin, the airport in Tagu, and I'm watching Honduras disappear. And I just started bawling uncontrollably, didn't know why. And it took a couple days after we got home because of all of our work and kids and everything. And we finally sat down to debrief and found out we were both feeling the same thing. And that's when we know that God is speaking to us, when he speaks to him and to me exactly the same. He was feeling like he'd left home. Really? And we prayed, and God said, go. And didn't tell us what we were going to do. If he did, we probably never would have gone because it was too big, too difficult. It was too impossible.
And leaving.
And too scary.
Your country and your family also. That's hard to do.
Yeah, we left our families, our jobs. He was pastoring 2 churches and had a business with his parents.
Wow.
And I was writing television shows and doing journalism for newspapers. And
Did y'all speak the language?
We didn't at the time, but once we got there, my husband, he's speaking it. He understands it more than he can speak it, but
we read it better. We can read it, but not. We can speak it very little since, you know, we do a lot of mission trips. But when we get home, we have no one to speak it with, so we
forget it.
Kind of forget it. But how did you? What is you? I read in your book Gospel Justice. How did you where did gospel justice come from? Well,
before I tell you how that started, let me tell you the difference between social justice and gospel justice.
Go ahead.
Okay. Social justice is based on man's laws and man's ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Gospel justice is based on God's law and what God says is right or wrong. The Hebrew word zedek means to make things right, and that is the word used for justice in the Bible. It's Jesus dying on the cross is making things right for us. God has a heart of justice. There's another word called mishpat. It's a Hebrew word, and that is how God views us on how we treat the most vulnerable in our society. Justice is actually the second most prominent theme in the entire Bible. Jesus was all about justice, of seeing the invisible and serving the broken. He wasn't here for the people who were in the church. He was here for, like, the woman who touched the hem of his garment.
Yes.
The law, man's law, said she could be stoned to death for being in public.
Yes.
She risked her life just to have faith to touch the hem of his garment. And you can't tell me that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords didn't know who touched him.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
He did.
He said, who touched me? And the disciples like, there's all these people around. He said that because he wanted to turn around. She was an invisible and say, I see you.
Yeah.
And that's what gospel justice is about, saying, I see you, to the most vulnerable and being a part of their redemption story.
Well, what is vulnerable, okay. Are there so many people in Honduras that are vulnerable? Are they in hard places? Tell us about the people.
Honduras is the murder capital of the world for women, for LGBT, for human rights advocates and journalists. It was the murder capital of the world in 2010 and 11. It's now maybe the second or third. In World Justice, there's a organization, World Justice Project, and they put out a justice report every year. Honduras is third from the bottom in justice worldwide.
Third from the bottom?
Third from the bottom, 126, wow. Or fourth from the bottom, 126 out of 129.
Wow.
Countries.
So, and there's so much poverty
Yes.
in Honduras, and I think that's how the gangs, because there are a lot of gangs, right, in Honduras?
Yes, the problems are the gangs, the drug traffickers, and organized crime.
Do you think it is because of the poverty?
I think, well, it's a very complicated situation.
And the government.
You cannot put like one label on it to say what the problem is. But when we first got there, as I said, God did not tell us what we were going to do. He said go, and that was difficult fundraising.
What did you say when he said go? I said, what?
He just said go, and
Yeah.
we obeyed. We sold our house, our cars, we gave away our stuff. We landed in Honduras with 4 suitcases.
Wow.
And we went to the ministry that we had gone with the year before. We were with them for a year. But just a couple months, it was June 28, 2005, we landed. And a couple weeks later, there was a rainstorm in our village. And the mini little police post, it's just a little adobe building, dirt floor, tiles on the roof. And the police live at work. They get to go home 2 days every 15 days.
Wow.
And the police post collapsed. And the Lord said, rebuild that police post. That begins your entire ministry. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Wow. Yeah.
No sense whatsoever. And we asked people to help. Nobody wanted to help us because of the corruption and the death squads and all of the problems with the police, but we obeyed. We told our guy, if you're working for this ministry, you're building what this ministry is building, and we're rebuilding the post. And people began to come and watch. And after a few more weeks, it was the beginning of September, I'm out in the village. I didn't know what to do, so I just started walking around the village, taking people's blood sugar levels and blood pressures and praying over people and just getting to know them, because it's all about relationships, getting to know people. And I get my walkie-talkie goes off and says, there's police here at the mission, they want to talk to you. So I'm riding my bike down the dirt roads, and I come around the corner and I see a big police truck and like 12 armed men in camouflage gear with big guns, like you were saying when we were talking earlier, AK-47s. And it wasn't actually AK-47s because they were illegal even for the police, but I was scared. And there's this one guy standing there, he has all this gold on his cap and shoulders, and he's telling me he's a colonel and he's in charge of the whole state. And all the staff from that ministry, everyone was shut up behind closed doors. I was out there alone. And I'm like, And he said, we're aware of your activities. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to jail. What did we do? I'm going to be in a third world country jail. And then, and then he begins to tell me about the problems between the police and the people, which we had just discovered. And he said the Minister of Security wanted to know if we would teach the police how to serve and have them go with us when we delivered food, have them go with us in the villages, and have the people see them serving. He wanted us to stand in the gap and be the bridge of reconciliation between the people and the police.
Oh, that's so God.
So we started doing that, and Alex Roberto Villanueva Mesa, that's the colonel's name, he was a Christian man, and he would come over for dinner or coffee hour. I thank God every day that he made coffee. I love coffee.
Me too.
It's law in Honduras at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's coffee hour. You have to stop what you're doing and drink coffee. So the colonel would come over, and he heard my testimony, that at 21 I was drugged and raped and got pregnant. My pastor told me to abort the baby, and I didn't. My daughter will be 33 on the 17th of November. And how my first husband, that was only married a year, he was a drug addict and refused to give up his drugs. And I had to divorce him because he began dealing drugs to support his habit.
Yes, amen.
And I was doing special needs foster care, and you can't have that in your house, special needs foster care. I told him, me and God and the children, or you and your drugs. Sent him to rehab, he ran away. sent him back. Me and God and the kids are your drugs. And he got kicked out. And so I ended up divorcing him. I have a son from that marriage.
Yes.
He just turned 28 in September.
Awesome.
And so anyways, all of these things, I had been in a relationship with a man who was abusive, and he tried to kill me, tried to strangle me to death. And I had been stalked by a pedophile on parole, and
Wow.
all these horrible things that happened to me.
But see, God brings good out of that,
Exactly.
Gracie, because now you have this ministry to hurting women
Yes.
and children
Yes, God-
in Honduras.
God took every part of my life.
Mine too.
The
I'm
good,
with you.
the bad, the ugly, every job I've had, everything I've ever done wrong and mistake I've ever made, or thing that's happened to me for such a
to
time as
prepare
this.
you for this.
And so the colonel was listening to all of these stories, and one morning the sergeant showed up and said the colonel wanted to see me. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm in my jammies with my coffee. I'm like, when? He's like, now. And so I went to the police station. And the colonel began to tell me about violence against women and children in Honduras. And he said that less than 30% of special crimes are ever even reported to the
Reported,
police,
yeah.
because there's a culture not to report because of well, nobody will do anything. The corruption levels, or the police knowing the person that did it, or the police not knowing what to do. Then there was also the revenge culture, that if you told, you got killed. I mean, literally, it's not like someone might just be mean to you. It's like they may chop you up in pieces.
Yes.
And so people didn't report it. And he said that only about 12% of the cases that were reported went to court. And the United Nations has said that there's a 94 to 96% impunity rate in all special crimes. And special crimes are crimes that are committed against vulnerable groups. And that's where the mishpat comes in, how we treat the vulnerable groups. And that would be women and children, the elderly, the disabled, LGBT, indigenous, immigrants, anyone who's in a vulnerable group.
Yeah.
And so he was telling me all of this, and then began to tell me that the United Nations, the European Union, the United States, everyone was putting pressure on Honduras to do something, and they didn't know what or how to do
it. Yeah.
And he had heard that heard my testimony about being, there's a sign on my forehead. Nobody, I can't see it, but if someone's a victim, it says, if you're a victim, talk to this lady, since I was like 16 years old. And so it's just been my calling since then. And so he told me, he said, could you create a program? The Minister of Security wants to know if you can create a program.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why, World Vision, Save the Children, why can't they call someone important, But the word sure popped out of my mouth, and one thing led to another. 4 months I spent studying the laws, procedures, cultures, destroyed 4 Spanish-English dictionaries, and the Lord supernaturally gave me fluency in Spanish.
Wow.
In all of this. I think in it, I dream in it.
Wow.
I actually forget English words.
Oh, because we've tried for 14 years, because we've been doing the missions, to Honduras and all these places. And we come back, like I said, there's no one to talk with.
Yeah.
So we lose it. But that's a gift.
Yeah, it's a
for
gift.
you to fight for these people, though.
That's exactly.
Because you are fighting for these people,
Yes.
aren't you?
Yes.
And you live right down the street from Tegucigalpa. No, you're in Tegucigalpa from
No,
the
I'm
dump,
outside, yeah.
from the dump. And let me tell you, we have been to the dump, and you will cry your guts out. I mean, there's no other way. It's the most horrible place I've ever been to.
You see people.
And you see that
eating out of
the dump,
pulling
the children,
clothes
and just the horror of it. But you live close to that, and you see that, and you see death a lot, don't you?
Yes, we do. So as I said, he wanted me to create the program. So in January of 2006, I handed him the program in his office, and he puts it over on the side of the desk. I'm like, I just spent 4 months on that. Are you going to look at it? And this is destiny. This is the hand of God. This is the impossible becoming real. And remember, I'm a broken person. I've been through hell and back.
Yeah.
And here I am 6 months after arriving in this country, sitting in the office of a colonel who then says, yes, I'll look at it, but first, let me take you downstairs to the office we're building for you. You are now Chief of Special Crimes.
Oh,
I'm like, what? I thought my job was over, And so I had to ask him a couple times because I wasn't getting it. And so he just finally took me downstairs. And on the 20th of February, 2006, generals came from Tegucigalpa, the national media came, and I was inaugurated in a formal inauguration ceremony as an auxiliary lieutenant inspector in the National Police in charge of the first Special Victims Office in Honduras.
Wow.
At the hand of the Lord.
That's how God directs. That's leading your footsteps. Like you said, all of us, all that we go through prepares us for what God has. Jeremiah 20:11, for I know the plans I have for you. God had a plan for you,
did.
Gracie,
And
in
so,
that.
because of all that had happened to me, like my husband is a pastor. We'll celebrate 20 years of marriage in May. Praise God. Thank you,
Praise
Jesus.
God.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
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 Okay.
We got a minute.
Lee, I love you, baby.
Yeah.
And I know he's trying to watch this.
Yeah.
But when I met him and he wanted to become, boyfriend, girlfriend, I thought I was so damaged. I literally was terrified to kiss him. I thought that, boom, God would strike me dead with lightning. And
now you've been married
and here we are. And
20 years later. Yeah.
in this work, we discovered that there were no shelters for women. There was one super underfunded shelter in Tegu.
Oh, my
And
word.
so in November 2007, we opened the first women's shelter.
Well, listen, we've got to go to music, but I want to ask you, how can they get your book?
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to come back and let's finish this because we didn't have enough time, Grace.
Yeah,
we
I
just
can't
did
believe
not
that
have time.
time's up.
I know it. We didn't get into all of it, what I wanted to, but stay right there. We got Charlie Sexton and Homecoming singing "Child Have No Fear" and "Across the Bridge." Thank you.